The stale scent of cheap air freshener and old carpet filled Chloe's lungs as she slid the key into the lock of room 214. The door swung open with a reluctant creak, revealing the same generic beige box she'd called home for the past 3 months. A double bed with a worn floral spread, a particleboard desk holding her laptop, and a window overlooking the motel's neon sign that flickered all night long. It wasn't much, but it was a temporary shelter, a stepping stone. At 22, fresh out of community college with an associate's degree in graphic design and a portfolio she was fiercely proud of, this motel on the outskirts of Austin was her launchpad. She dropped her heavy messenger bag by the door, the weight of the day, a grueling shift at the Daily Grind coffee shop followed by 2 disappointing rejection emails for junior designer positions, sloughing off her shoulders. All she wanted was to peel off her stiff barista apron and the jeans that felt 2 sizes too tight after 8 hours on her feet. A hot shower, her favorite oversized sleep token t-shirt, and a deep dive into her latest digital art project were the only items on her evening agenda. She unplugged her phone from its charger, opening her carefully curated inspiration playlist. The haunting, melodic strains of a progressive metal band filled the small room, drowning out the distant hum of the interstate. This was her ritual, her way of reclaiming the space as her own. She walked to the window, pulling the heavy curtains shut against the encroaching dusk, the flickering red, vacancy, light casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. With a sigh of relief, she pulled the coffee-stained t-shirt over her head and tossed it into the open suitcase that served as her dresser. She unsnapped her jeans, wriggling out of them and kicking them into a corner. Standing in her simple cotton bra and underwear, she felt a moment of pure, uncomplicated freedom. The day was done, her shoulders relaxed, she padded over to the bed where her soft, gray t-shirt lay waiting, a promised land of comfort. This was the moment, the mundane, private, utterly universal act of changing clothes. A slice of life so insignificant, so routine, it was beneath notice. She reached for the t-shirt. Knock, 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 3 sharp, firm raps on the door. Chloe froze, her hand hovering over the soft gray cotton. Her heart gave a single, hard thump against her ribs. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her only friend in town, Maya, was working a double shift at the hospital. The motel manager, a perpetually weary man named Bill, only knocked if the rent was late, and she'd paid just 2 days ago. Maybe it was a mistake. A wrong room. She held her breath, waiting for the sound of retreating footsteps. They didn't come. Instead, a man's voice, muffled but clear, called out. Maintenance. We've had a report of a leak from the room above. Need to check your bathroom ceiling. Maintenance. Now. A flush of annoyance mixed with a prickle of unease. She glanced at the bathroom. The ceiling looked perfectly dry. But what if there was a leak? The last thing she needed was a collapsed ceiling or a massive water bill. Just a minute. She called out, her voice tighter than she intended. Her mind raced. She was in her underwear. Her robe was hanging in the bathroom, on the other side of the room, directly in the line of sight of the door. Her jeans were a tangled heap in the corner. The quickest, most logical option was right in front of her, the sleep token t-shirt. She could yank it on, and it was long enough to serve as a makeshift dress. It would have to do. She snatched the shirt, her fingers fumbling in her haste. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Ma'am, it'll just take a second. I'm coming, she said, her voice laced with a nervous edge she couldn't suppress. She pulled the shirt over her head, the soft fabric settling around her. It fell to mid-thigh, decent, if barely. She took a steadying breath, ran a hand through her messy bun, and walked to the door. She didn't bother with the peephole, her mind occupied with the minor inconvenience. She'd let him in, he'd look at the ceiling, and he'd leave. 2 minutes, tops. She turned the deadbolt and pulled the door open. It wasn't Bill the manager. It wasn't the lanky, friendly maintenance man she'd seen fixing an ice machine a week ago. The man standing in her doorway was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed not in maintenance coveralls, but in dark, well-fitting jeans and a black leather jacket. He was handsome in a sharp, almost severe way, with dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a stormy sea that were currently wide with a shock that mirrored her own. He looked to be in his late 20s, and he carried an air of intensity that was completely at odds with the shabby motel corridor. In his hand wasn't a toolbox, but a large, expensive-looking manila envelope. They stood frozen for a heartbeat, a perfect tableau of mutual, catastrophic miscalculation. His gaze flickered from her face, down the length of the t-shirt, to her bare legs, and back up again, a slow, dawning horror replacing the initial surprise on his features. Chloe's own brain stuttered, trying to process this disconnect. Maintenance. This man looked like he'd stepped out of a Wall Street Journal or a spy thriller. You're not maintenance, she stammered, her hand gripping the edge of the door, ready to slam it shut. The man seemed to snap out of his stupor. He shook his head, a curt, frustrated motion. No, I'm not. I'm looking for a David Miller. I was told this was his room. His voice was a low baritone, laced with an urgency that felt out of place. There's no David Miller here, Chloe said, her own fear now spiking, sharp and cold. It's just me. You have the wrong room. She started to push the door closed. His arm shot out, his palm flat against the wood, stopping it with an easy strength that sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her. Wait. The single word was not a request. It was a command, layered with a desperation that made her pause. His eyes were no longer on her, but were scanning the room behind her, the single suitcase, the laptop on the desk, the single set of toiletries in the bathroom. His jaw tightened. Please, he said, and the words seemed to cost him something. His gaze returned to hers, and the intensity in them was overwhelming. My name is Jake Mitchell. The man who was supposed to be in this room, he has something that belongs to me. Something incredibly important. Everything depends on it. Chloe's heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was bad. This was so far beyond a simple wrong room. This was a confrontation, and she was trapped in the middle of it, dressed in nothing but a thin t-shirt. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice trembling. I've been renting this room for 3 months. The manager, Bill, he can tell you. There's no David Miller. Now, please, leave. Jake Mitchell, if that was even his real name, didn't move his hand. He looked like a man pushed to the very edge of his endurance. The fine leather of his jacket, the sharp cut of his jaw, it all spoke of money and control, but the look in his eyes was one of raw, undisguised panic. 3 months, he repeated, the words hollow. That's impossible. The booking was confirmed for him this week. This specific room. He pulled his phone from his pocket, thrusting the screen towards her. It showed a booking confirmation for the Sunset Motel, room 214 feet under the name David Miller, for a one-night stay, starting today. A cold dread began to creep up Chloe's spine. This was some kind of mistake, a clerical error of catastrophic proportions. But the man in front of her wasn't acting like someone who'd mixed up a room number. He was acting like a man whose life was falling apart. I don't know what to tell you, she said, her own desperation rising. Look around. Do you see anyone else here? It's just me and my suitcase. Now, get your hand off my door or I'll scream. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The storm in his eyes seemed to rage, and then, just as suddenly, it died down, replaced by a devastating, bone-deep defeat. The strength seemed to leach out of him. He slowly lowered his hand from the door. I've lost it, he whispered, more to himself than to her. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. It's gone. He turned away from her, his broad shoulders slumping. He took a step back into the corridor, looking utterly lost. The transformation was so complete, so stark, that Chloe's initial fear was momentarily overshadowed by a baffling pang of something. Pity, curiosity. He was just standing there, in the middle of the dingy hallway, a picture of utter despair. The expensive envelope hung limply from his fingers. Against every single instinct of self-preservation screaming in her head, Chloe didn't slam the door. She kept it open a crack, her eye pressed to the space between the door and the frame. What did you lose? The question was out of her mouth before she could stop it. He turned back, his expression one of profound exhaustion. A prototype, a new type of solid-state battery. The designs, the chemical formula, the manufacturing process. It's all on a single data chip. My company, it's a startup. We've spent 5 years and every dollar I have, plus every dollar I could borrow, on this. Our first major investor presentation is in 48 hours. A rival company got wind of it. They sent someone, David Miller, to intercept the courier. I tracked him here. I was supposed to intercept him. He gestured weakly with the envelope. This was supposed to be the bait. Fake plans. A trade. But he's not here. He must have known. He must have the real chip, and I have no idea where he is. The story tumbled out of him, fragmented and desperate, but it had the ring of truth. It was too bizarre, too specific, to be a lie concocted on the spot. Chloe's mind, usually occupied with color palettes and vector graphics, reeled. Corporate espionage. Data chips. It was a world away from coffee stains and design software. Oh, was all she could manage. Jake let out a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, oh, my life's work, the livelihoods of 17 employees, it's in the pocket of a corporate spy because I was 5 minutes too late. He leaned his head back against the opposite wall, closing his eyes. I'm ruined. The silence that descended was heavy and thick. Chloe stood in her doorway, shivering slightly in the air conditioning, her earlier fear now a tangled knot of sympathy and confusion. She watched this stranger, this Jake Mitchell, as he faced his abyss right there on the scuffed floral carpet of the Sunset Motel. The world, for both of them, had tilted on its axis the moment she opened that door. Her simple plan for the evening was ash. His multi-million-dollar company was on the verge of collapse. Everything had changed. And then, a memory, faint and buried under the shock, surfaced in Chloe's mind. A flicker of something she'd seen but not registered. Wait, she said, her voice quiet. Jake's eyes opened. They were bleak. The mail, she continued, thinking out loud. I picked up my mail from the front desk this morning. Bill was complaining. He said the new guy, the temporary mail carrier, was a mess. That he'd delivered a bunch of stuff to the wrong rooms yesterday. He gave me a small package, said it was in my slot by mistake. It had no postage, just a room number written on it. 214. Jake was perfectly still, his entire being focused on her. I thought it was just a mistake, Chloe said. I was going to take it back to Bill later, but I got distracted with job applications and I tossed it on the desk. She stepped back, pulling the door open wider, and pointed to the small, innocuous padded envelope lying half under a stack of printouts next to her laptop. Jake was across the threshold in 2 long strides. He didn't touch it at first, just stared at it as if it were a holy relic or a venomous snake. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for it. He picked it up. It was light. He turned it over. Scrawled in black marker was the number 214. With painstaking care, he tore it open. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a single, unremarkable-looking black micro-SD chip. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. His shoulders, which had been a rigid line of tension, slumped in profound relief. He sank into the chair at her desk, the chip clutched in his palm, his head bowed. Chloe watched him, her own heart still racing. She slowly closed the motel room door, the click of the lock sounding abnormally loud in the quiet room. She was now alone with this stranger, this Jake Mitchell, who had just gone from the brink of ruin to what looked like salvation, all in the space of 30 seconds. He looked up at her, his expression one of dazed, overwhelming disbelief. The storm in his eyes had cleared, replaced by a clarity that was almost unsettling. It's here, he said, his voice rough with emotion. How? Why did you have this? The mail mix-up, Chloe repeated, wrapping her arms around herself, suddenly acutely aware of her state of undress. The courier must have tried to deliver it to David Miller, but the temp put it in my slot by mistake. Jake just shook his head, a slow, wondering motion. A mail mix-up, a random clerical error. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. His gaze took in the sleek token t-shirt, her bare legs, her face, which she knew was probably pale with shock. You just saved me. You saved everything. He stood up, the movement fluid and purposeful now, the weight of the world visibly lifted from his shoulders. He held out the chip. This is it. This is the future. Chloe just nodded, not knowing what to say. The surrealism of the situation was starting to make her feel lightheaded. Jake's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened back into that of the focused, intense man who had first pushed against her door. It's my COO. I have to take this. He walked over to the window, speaking in low, rapid-fire sentences. Ethan, I have it. No, it's a long story. The chip is secure. Yes, tell the team, we're back on track. While he talked, Chloe stood frozen in the middle of the room, a spectator in her own life. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a shaky exhaustion. She felt exposed, vulnerable. She edged towards the corner where she'd discarded her jeans, her movements stiff. Jake finished his call and turned back to her. The intensity was back, but it was different now. It was focused on her. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice softer now. The way I barged in here, I was desperate. I terrified you. I am so sorry. It's okay, Chloe managed, though it wasn't, not really. It was a strange situation. That's an understatement. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less severe. What's your name? Chloe. Chloe Davis. Chloe Davis, he repeated, as if committing it to memory. I don't know how to thank you. There's no way to properly thank you. Thank you, is completely inadequate for what you just did. You don't have to thank me, she said, finally grabbing her jeans and pulling them on under her t-shirt, the simple act restoring a small measure of her composure. I just happened to be in the wrong room at the right time, I guess. That's the thing, Jake said, his gaze intense. You weren't in the wrong room. You were in the exact right room. That chip was supposed to go to a thief. It ended up with you. That's not a coincidence. That's fate intervening. Chloe didn't believe in fate. She believed in hard work, in bad luck, in grinding it out at a coffee shop until you caught a break. But standing here, with this man and this tiny piece of technology that held so much power, it was hard to dismiss the idea entirely. So, what happens now? She asked. With David Miller. Is he still out there? Jake's expression turned grim. My security team is already on it. He'll be long gone by now, but we'll find him. The important thing is that he doesn't have the prototype. We have it. He looked down at the chip in his hand, then back at her. And we have a presentation in 48 hours. I need to get back to my lab. My team needs to see this, needs to know it's safe. He started toward the door, then stopped, his hand on the knob. He turned back to her, a conflicted look on his face. This is going to sound insane, he began, and after what I just put you through, you have every right to say no. But come with me. Chloe blinked. What? Where? To the lab. To my company, Mitrel Tech. I can't just walk out of here. You're the only person who knows the whole story. You're a part of this now, whether you meant to be or not. Come with me, see what you just saved. It was the craziest thing she had ever heard. Go with a complete stranger to his company in the middle of the night. An hour ago, she'd been afraid he was a dangerous intruder. But she looked at him. She saw the earnest, almost pleading look in his eyes. She thought about the 3 months of rejection emails, of serving lattes to people who barely saw her, of the digital art projects that lived only on her hard drive. She thought about the sheer, unimaginable strangeness of the last 15 minutes. This was a story, a real, pulsing, high-stakes story, and she was right in the center of it. Her life of quiet desperation had just been violently interrupted by a world of corporate intrigue and technological dreams. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said. The word hung in the air between them, as monumental as the chip in his hand. Okay, he repeated, surprise etching his features. Okay, Chloe confirmed, a strange new courage settling in her chest. Let's go see what I saved. She grabbed her hoodie from the back of the chair, pulled it on, and slipped her feet into her worn-out Vans. She picked up her wallet and phone, her movements now decisive. She was no longer the girl just changing clothes, startled by a knock at the door. She was Chloe Davis, the girl who, through a bizarre twist of fate, had just become the unlikely guardian of a technological revolution. As she followed Jake Mitchell out of room 214 and into the neon-lit night, she knew without a doubt that nothing would ever be the same again. The door to her old life had closed the moment she'd opened it to a stranger. And a new, terrifying, and exhilarating one was just beginning. Everything had changed.